The tension in the House Judiciary Committee room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Jonathan Roumie, his face calm yet focused, leaned into his microphone with a quiet but firm presence. His voice resonated through the marble halls of Congress as he calmly addressed the newest member sitting across from him. "You're missing the bigger picture. This isn't about partisanship, it's about accountability," Roumie said, his tone steady. His eyes remained fixed on the committee chair, but his posture was one of cool professionalism. The cameras captured every second as his calm demeanor contrasted with the outbursts around him. But Lauren Boebert didn't hold back. She leaned forward, her voice rising in frustration. "You don't understand the system," she snapped. "You have no experience with real American values." Her fist slammed on the table, papers scattering. The cameras zoomed in, capturing her intense outburst. However, Roumie didn't flinch. He stayed composed, his hands resting calmly on the table, waiting for the noise to die down. When Boebert's fury reached its peak, Roumie simply said, "I understand perfectly, but this moment requires clarity, not chaos." His words were measured, and their impact was immediate. What happened next shocked everyone in that room and sent the internet into a frenzy. His response was so controlled, so devastatingly effective, that within hours it became the most viral moment in political history. This wasn't just another committee hearing. This was the moment when Jonathan Roumie, a man known for his composure and intellect, showed Washington exactly who he was and left Lauren Boebert, one of the most divisive figures in Congress, completely speechless. Roumie entered the hearing with the calm authority of someone who had faced far tougher opponents. He had made his career in front of cameras, using his presence to convey emotion without ever losing control. In a world dominated by loud voices and heated rhetoric, Roumie's cool confidence was his greatest weapon. Lauren Boebert, on the other hand, was exactly what Roumie had expected. Known for her sharp rhetoric and unyielding partisan stance, she had a reputation for tearing into her opponents with aggressive attacks. Yet in this moment, her typical bluster only served to highlight her inability to control the situation. Roumie had been preparing for this kind of confrontation. He knew that when people lash out, it's usually because they're losing control. The committee room was packed. C-SPAN cameras were rolling live. Political reporters filled the press gallery, their phones ready to capture every detail. Everyone could feel something significant was about to unfold. Boebert, unaware of the trap, thought this would be another opportunity to dominate the conversation. But what she didn't know was that Roumie had studied her tactics and knew exactly how to diffuse them. Boebert's team had leaked their talking points to conservative media outlets. They had planned an attack, hoping to catch Roumie off guard with questions about his lack of experience in politics. But Roumie remained unshaken. He had been preparing for moments like this throughout his career. While Boebert was preparing for a shouting match, Roumie was preparing something entirely different. When the hearing began, Boebert had the floor first. She immediately launched into her usual style, loud, aggressive, and dominating. Her voice echoed through the room as she interrupted, demanded quick answers, and pointed her finger like a seasoned politician. "The system is broken, and we need change," she shouted, her finger jabbing in the air. As Boebert made her opening remarks, Roumie sat quietly, taking notes, waiting for the right moment to strike. He didn't react to her interruptions or loud proclamations. He simply watched and listened. The reporters in the press gallery exchanged curious glances, wondering when Roumie would finally speak up. They expected him to challenge Boebert's tactics head-on, but instead, he simply bided his time, letting her run out of steam. When Roumie finally spoke, his questions were calm and precise, probing into the details of the issue at hand. "If the system is broken, what exactly are we proposing to fix?" he asked Boebert, who had been touting reform plans but offering no concrete solutions. Boebert, caught off guard by his methodical approach, stumbled in her response, unable to answer the question without resorting to her usual sound bites. Boebert, growing frustrated, interrupted him again, accusing Roumie of being out of touch with real Americans. Roumie didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "The real question here is not about politics," he said quietly. "It's about the lives of people affected by the policies we discuss. If we're truly focused on them, then let's discuss solutions, not slogans." Boebert's face turned red, her frustration growing, while Roumie remained composed, his every word calculated and focused. The room could feel the shift in power. Roumie had not attacked her personally. He had simply shown that the discussion could be elevated beyond petty politics. As the hearing continued, Boebert's aggression escalated. She accused Roumie of not understanding the stakes, of being an outsider with no real political experience. Her voice cracked, and her words became more pointed. "You may be an actor, but this is real life," she shouted. Roumie calmly responded, "I may be an actor, but I've learned one thing. Real life requires empathy, listening, and understanding. It requires us to put aside our egos and focus on what actually matters." By the time the hearing came to a close, Boebert was visibly shaken. Her emotional outbursts had only made her look unhinged. Meanwhile, Roumie had maintained the upper hand, with the room recognizing that his approach was far more measured and effective. When Boebert tried to make another point, Roumie simply asked, "Are you okay? Do you need a minute to collect yourself?" The silence in the room was deafening. Everyone had seen what had just transpired. Roumie, through calm composure and strategic questioning, had not only won the exchange but had made Boebert's fiery rhetoric seem like a tantrum. The video of this moment quickly went viral, spreading across social media platforms faster than anyone could track. Lauren Boebert's approval ratings plummeted, while Roumie, in just one hearing, had secured his place as a force to be reckoned with in Washington. He wasn't just a celebrity actor anymore. He was a political figure who knew how to navigate the storm without losing his temper. In a world of extreme partisan bickering, Roumie's composed demeanor had changed the game entirely. This moment wasn't just a viral political spectacle. It marked a fundamental shift in how we see political power. Jonathan Roumie had shown that you don't need to yell to be heard. You don't need to fight to win. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay calm and let your opponent implode on their own. Every interruption, every raised voice, every dramatic pause, Lauren Boebert was cataloging his patterns, finding his weaknesses. When her first opportunity came, Jonathan Roumie's questions were measured and professional. He asked detailed questions about the witnesses' backgrounds, their funding sources, their previous statements. Nothing flashy, nothing that would give Lauren Boebert an opening to attack. The political reporters looked confused. Where were the fireworks? Where was the conflict they'd been promised? Boebert seemed almost disappointed. She had been gearing up for a fight, but Roumie wasn't giving her one yet. As the hearing progressed, something started to shift. Roumie's questions were getting sharper, more pointed. He wasn't raising his voice or getting emotional. He was just systematically dismantling the witness's credibility with surgical precision. "So you're telling us that the Department of Justice is weaponized?" Roumie said to one witness. "But you've never actually worked at the Department of Justice, is that correct?" "Well, no, and you're not a lawyer." "Correct. But your organization receives funding from groups that have publicly stated their goal is to destroy the administrative state. Is that accurate?" The witness stammered. Boebert's eyes narrowed. This wasn't going according to plan. By the third hour, Boebert had had enough. When Roumie began questioning another witness about their qualifications, she exploded. "Point of order," she shouted, despite not holding the gavel. "The gentleman is badgering the witness." Roumie didn't even look at her. He continued his questioning calmly, professionally. Boebert's face started turning red. "Mr. Chairman, I demand that the gentleman be directed to treat our witnesses with respect." Finally, Roumie turned to look at her. His expression was completely neutral, almost bored. "I'm simply asking about their qualifications, Ms. Boebert. Isn't that what we're supposed to do in a congressional hearing?" The simplicity of his response made Boebert look foolish. She was the one shouting, the one getting emotional, while Roumie remained perfectly professional. Boebert decided to change tactics. Instead of following the normal process, she went for a direct attack during her next round of questioning. "You know what, Mr. Roumie," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Maybe if you spent less time in front of cameras and more time actually understanding how this place works, you'd get the point." The room went silent. Everyone knew this was crossing a line. You don't attack fellow members personally during hearings. But Boebert was betting that Roumie would respond emotionally, giving her the opening she needed to paint him as unfit for Congress. Roumie looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled slightly and said, "Thank you for that feedback, Ms. Boebert. I'll take it under advisement." Boebert blinked. That wasn't the response she expected. She had insulted him directly, questioned his competence, and he just thanked her. Over the next 30 minutes, she interrupted Roumie 6 times, claimed he was out of order 4 times, and made increasingly personal attacks on his qualifications and experience. "Maybe they do things differently in Hollywood," she sneered during one exchange. "But here in Congress, we follow the rules." "Perhaps Mr. Roumie should stick to areas where he has actual expertise," she said during another. Each attack was designed to provoke an emotional response. Each one failed. Roumie remained calm, professional, and devastatingly effective in his questioning. But everyone in the room could feel the pressure building. Boebert was getting more frustrated, more aggressive, more desperate to get under his skin. Her voice was getting louder, her gestures more dramatic. A moment everyone was waiting for came during the fourth hour of the hearing. Boebert had just finished a particularly aggressive round of questioning. When Roumie had asked for recognition to question the same witness, his questions were surgical. Within 5 minutes, he had gotten the witness to admit that his expert testimony was based entirely on news articles and social media posts. The witness looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat as Roumie methodically destroyed his credibility. Boebert watched in growing fury as her carefully selected witness fell apart under basic questioning. This was supposed to be easy. This was supposed to make Democrats look weak and unprepared. Instead, her opponent, a Hollywood actor, was making her look like an amateur. When Roumie finished his questioning, Boebert was practically vibrating with rage. Her knuckles were white where she gripped her gavel. Her jaw was clenched so tight it looked painful. The next exchange would change everything. Boebert's breaking point came without warning. As Roumie began his final round of questioning, asking the witness about his organization's ties to dark money groups, Boebert completely lost control. "Enough!" she screamed, her voice cracking as it echoed through the chamber. She slammed her gavel so hard that several people in the gallery jumped. "I will not sit here and watch you destroy the reputation of honest Americans." The room fell dead silent. C-SPAN cameras zoomed in on Boebert's red face, capturing every detail of her meltdown. Democratic members stared in shock. Even Republican members looked uncomfortable. But Boebert wasn't finished. Standing up from her chair, she pointed directly at Roumie, her fingers shaking with rage. "You don't know what you're talking about," she shouted. "You're completely out of line. You're a Hollywood actor who thinks he can come in here and disrespect the entire process." Her voice was so loud that security officers outside the committee room stepped closer to the doors. Reporters frantically typed on their phones, trying to capture every word of the unprecedented outburst. "You're grandstanding. You're playing politics. You're everything that's wrong with Congress today." Boebert continued, her face now purple with fury. Roumie didn't interrupt, didn't respond, didn't even change his expression. He just waited. The contrast was stunning. On one side, a 50-year-old woman having a complete breakdown on national television. On the other side, a calm, composed actor who looked like he was watching a mildly interesting movie. When Boebert finally paused to catch her breath, the room was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning hum. Everyone was staring at Roumie, waiting to see how he would respond to this unprecedented attack. He took a small sip of water from the glass in front of him. He straightened his papers neatly. She looked up at Boebert with an expression of mild concern, like a teacher looking at a student who just had a tantrum. But in the dead silence of the room, every word carried perfectly. "Ms. Boebert," Roumie said quietly, "are you okay? Do you need a minute to collect yourself?" The words hit like a thunderbolt. In 6 simple words, he had completely reversed the power dynamic in the room. Boebert, who had been trying to intimidate him, suddenly looked like an out-of-control child being gently corrected by the adult in the room. But Roumie wasn't finished. "If you're done with your outburst," he continued, his voice still perfectly calm, "I'd like to continue asking questions that might actually help the American people understand what's happening here." He had faced everything she had thrown at him, screaming, personal attacks, abuse of power, and responded as if he were asking her to pass the salt. Roumie waited a beat, then continued speaking in the same calm, measured tone. "You see, Ms. Boebert," he said, "I've been in courtrooms where actual lives were on the line. I've faced down prosecutors trying to send innocent people to prison. I've stared down judges who thought I didn't belong in their courtroom." His voice never rose above a conversational level song, but somehow it commanded the attention of everyone in the room. "So when you raise your voice at me, when you try to intimidate me, when you abuse your position to silence me," he paused, looking directly into her eyes, "I just wonder if this is really the best you've got." The effect was immediate and electric. Someone in the gallery actually gasped. A Democratic member put his hand over his mouth to hide a smile. Even some of the Republican members looked like they were struggling not to react. Boebert's face went from red to pale, her confidence shattered. She had been completely, utterly destroyed, and it had happened so smoothly, so professionally, that she didn't even realize it until it was over. Roumie simply raised his eyebrows slightly, as if waiting for her to form a complete sentence. "Now, Ms. Boebert," he said in the same calm tone, "you were saying that you based your testimony on what you read on social media. Can you tell us which specific social media accounts you consider credible sources for constitutional law? The casual way Roumie dismissed Boebert and returned to his work was the final blow. He hadn't just beaten her in their confrontation. He'd made her irrelevant to it. Boebert slowly sank back into her chair, still staring at him in disbelief. The most feared interrogator in Congress had just been taken apart by a freshman member who never even raised her voice. Within seconds, phones throughout the press gallery were buzzing with notifications. The C-SPAN clip was already being uploaded to social media. Political reporters were frantically typing tweets, trying to capture what they had just witnessed. Breaking politics live. Holy Jonathan Roumie just absolutely destroyed Lauren Boebert without even raising his voice. This is incredible, one tweeted. Congress watch. I've covered Congress for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like this. Boebert is speechless. The video was spreading faster than anyone could track. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, every platform was exploding with shares, reactions, and commentary. Trying to salvage some dignity, Boebert attempted to regain control of the hearing, but her voice was shaky, her confidence shattered. We'll take a 15-minute recess, she announced, her voice barely audible after her earlier screaming. As members filed out of the committee room, Roumie remained seated, calmly reviewing his notes. He looked completely unbothered, as if he'd just finished a routine discussion rather than delivering one of the most devastating political beatdowns in congressional history. Boebert, meanwhile, hurried out of the room, surrounded by her staff, who were already trying to figure out how to spin what had just happened. But there was no spinning this. The video spoke for itself, and the internet was about to make sure everyone saw it. Within 30 minutes of the hearing, Jonathan Destroys Boebert was trending #1 on Twitter. The video of his calm response to her screaming had been viewed over 100,000 times and was accelerating fast. But it wasn't just the raw numbers, it was the quality of the reaction. Political commentators who normally disagreed on everything were united in their amazement at what they had witnessed. I've seen a lot of political moments in my time, said Van Jones. This is one for the history books. Roumie just showed the entire country how to handle a bully. I don't often agree with progressive Democrats, said Bill Kristol, but Boebert's behavior was disgraceful, and Roumie's response was masterful. This is how public servants should conduct themselves. Roumie just gave a masterclass in staying cool under pressure, added another commentator. The internet's meme creators went into overdrive. The image of Boebert screaming while Roumie sat calmly became an instant template. One popular meme showed Boebert's red face with the caption, "When you're used to intimidating people but meet someone who actually knows what they're doing." Another showed Roumie's calm expression with the "Tietam, are you okay? Do you need a minute?" over various images of people having meltdowns. TikTok users created thousands of videos using her audio over clips of everything from toddler tantrums to reality TV drama. The phrase, "Are you okay? Do you need a minute?" became an instant cultural phenomenon. Political analysts couldn't stop talking about the exchange. Cable news shows played the clip on loop, bringing in experts to analyze every aspect of what had happened. On CNN, legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin broke down Roumie's technique. What he did there is classic courtroom strategy. When an opponent is losing control, you stay calm and let them destroy themselves. But the way he turned it around with genuine-sounding concern, that's next level. Fox News found themselves in an awkward position. Their host wanted to defend Boebert, but the video was so clearly damaging that even they couldn't spin it effectively. "Look, Boebert is a fighter," said one host. "Sometimes fighters get passionate, but maybe this particular approach wasn't the most effective." MSNBC was less restrained. "What we witnessed today," said one commentator, "was the difference between someone who actually knows how to do this job and someone who just likes to make noise." Roumie showed the maturity and professionalism that we should expect from our elected officials. By the end of the first day, the video had been viewed over 5 million times across all platforms. News outlets that normally ignored committee hearings were making it their lead story. The clip was being shared in languages Roumie didn't even know existed. International news outlets picked up the story with headlines like, "American actor's calm response to colleague's outburst goes viral worldwide." But the most telling statistic was the engagement. People weren't just watching the video, they were sharing it, commenting on it, and creating their own content inspired by it. This wasn't just a viral moment, it was a cultural phenomenon. Lauren Boebert's team tried everything to control the narrative. They released a statement claiming that Boebert was passionately defending the American people and that her emotions showed how much she cares about justice. The statement was immediately mocked online, defending the American people by screaming at a colleague asking questions. One Twitter user replied, "That's some next-level defending right there." Boebert herself tried to do interviews to explain her behavior, but every appearance just made things worse. When asked about Roumie's response, she called it disrespectful and inappropriate. The pushback was swift and brutal. She asked if you were okay. "How is that disrespectful?" one interviewer pointed out. Boebert's usual allies in conservative media were notably quiet. Even they seemed to recognize that this was not a hill worth dying on. Meanwhile, Roumie was handling his sudden fame with the same calm professionalism he'd shown in the hearing. His first statement was characteristically measured. "I came to Congress to do a job, not to get into shouting matches. When someone tries to intimidate me or my colleagues, I'll respond appropriately, but I'd rather focus on the work the American people sent me here to do." Democratic fundraising groups immediately reached out, offering to help him capitalize on his viral moment. Progressive organizations started talking about him as a rising star. Cable news shows competed to book him for interviews, but Roumie was strategic about his response. He did a few carefully selected interviews, staying on message about the importance of congressional oversight and professional conduct. He didn't gloat, didn't attack Boebert personally, and consistently redirected conversations back to policy issues. Political strategists recognized immediately that something significant had changed. For years, Boebert had been one of the most effective Republican attack dogs, capable of dominating news cycles and putting Democrats on the defense. Now, she'd been neutralized by an actor-turned-politician who made it look easy. "This changes the entire dynamic," explained one Democratic strategist. Boebert's whole brand was built on intimidation and aggression. When that doesn't work, when someone can just calmly deflect it, her power disappears. Republican strategists were more worried. Boebert was supposed to be their weapon against Democratic overreach. If she could be handled this easily by a junior member, what did that say about their other tactics? Beyond politics, the exchange resonated with millions of people who had faced workplace bullies, aggressive bosses, or intimidating authority figures. Roumie's response became a template for how to handle such situations. Self-help experts started citing the exchange in articles about dealing with difficult people. Business schools began using the video in courses about negotiation and conflict resolution. What he did, explained one workplace consultant, was textbook de-escalation. He didn't match her energy, didn't get defensive, and turned her aggression into a question about her well-being. It's brilliant. British newspapers covered it as an example of American political theater. European political commentators used it to analyze different cultural approaches to conflict. The BBC ran a segment on the art of political calm, featuring the Roumie Boebert exchange alongside similar moments in parliamentary systems worldwide. Even authoritarian governments took notice. State-controlled media in several countries tried to use the clip to show American democracy as chaotic and unstable, only to have their own citizens point out how professionally Roumie had handled the situation. Boebert's approval ratings dropped significantly, particularly among suburban voters who saw her behavior as unprofessional. Roumie, meanwhile, had become one of the most requested speakers at Democratic events. His fundraising numbers had quadrupled, and he was being mentioned as a potential statewide candidate in Texas. More importantly, the dynamic in congressional hearings had changed. Republican members were noticeably more careful about their tone and approach, knowing that aggressive tactics could backfire spectacularly. They called it "How to Stay Cool Under Fire," and it covered everything from voice control to body language. The session became so popular that senior Democratic members started attending as well, recognizing that even experienced politicians could learn from Roumie's masterclass in composure. The training materials included video analysis of the Boebert confrontation, breaking down every moment frame by frame to show exactly how Roumie maintained his advantage throughout the exchange. Professional communication experts were brought in to explain the psychological principles behind his success, and former prosecutors shared insights about courtroom techniques that translate perfectly to congressional hearings. The curriculum expanded to include media training specialists who taught members how their responses would look in short social media clips. Understanding that most voters would see their performance through 15-second viral videos rather than full C-SPAN coverage, the key lessons were simple but effective and became essential knowledge for any politician facing aggressive opponents. The first rule was to never match an aggressor's energy level, because responding to shouting with more shouting only makes both parties look unprofessional and gives the aggressor exactly what they want. Trainers emphasized that the camera captures everything, and viewers at home will always side with the person who appears more reasonable and controlled. Research data was presented showing that in political confrontations, the person who maintains composure sees their approval ratings increase while the aggressor typically suffers lasting damage to their reputation. The second principle involved using calm questions to highlight unreasonable behavior, which Jonathan Roumie demonstrated perfectly when he asked Lauren Boebert if she needed a minute to collect herself, instantly making her rage look childish and inappropriate. This technique works because it frames the aggressor's behavior as concerning rather than intimidating, completely flipping the power dynamic in the room. Participants practiced role-playing scenarios where they had to maintain composure while facing increasingly hostile questioning, learning to use tone and pacing as weapons of persuasion. Advanced sessions included training with actual hostile questioners, including retired Republican operatives who were paid to create the most challenging possible scenarios. The third lesson emphasized staying focused on facts and procedure rather than getting drawn into personal attacks, which keeps you looking competent and professional while your opponent loses all credibility. Instructors taught members to have prepared facts and statistics ready so they could pivot back to substance whenever someone tried to make things personal. Members learned to create mental fact banks organized by topic, allowing them to instantly access relevant information under pressure without appearing to read from notes. Finally, the most important rule was to let the other person's lack of control speak for itself, because nothing destroys a politician's reputation faster than a public meltdown captured on live television for millions to witness and share. The training emphasized patience above all else, teaching members that sometimes the best response is no response at all. Just letting the cameras capture the contrast between professional composure and unprofessional outbursts. Graduates of the program reported feeling significantly more confident in high-pressure situations, and several credited the training with helping them handle their own viral moments successfully. Political historians were already calling the exchange a watershed moment, the point when the old rules of political intimidation stopped working. What Jonathan Roumie did, wrote one analyst, was show that bullying only works if people are afraid. When someone responds with professionalism and calm confidence, the bully's power disappears. The phrase, "Are you okay? Do you need a minute?" entered the political lexicon permanently. It became shorthand for someone staying calm under pressure and turning an attack into a moment of strength. As the story continued to spread and evolve, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about one viral moment or one heated exchange. It was about a fundamental shift in how political power works in the social media age. The old model, where the loudest, most aggressive voice dominated, was being replaced by something new. In this new reality, composure and competence mattered more than volume and theatrics. Jonathan Roumie had accidentally become the face of this change. And judging by the continued popularity of his response, Americans were ready for politicians who could handle pressure without losing their minds. It showed that in an era of constant cameras and instant sharing, how you respond to pressure matters as much as what you say. For Boebert, it was a career-defining moment in the worst possible way. Her brand of aggressive intimidation had finally met its match, and the entire world had watched it happen. For Roumie, it was the launch of a national political career. He'd proven that you don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to be aggressive to be effective, and you don't have to lose your cool to win a fight. But perhaps most importantly, the exchange gave millions of Americans a new model for how to handle bullies, whether in Congress or in their own lives. Sometimes the most powerful response to someone screaming at you isn't to scream back, it's to calmly ask if they're okay. And sometimes that quiet question can be louder than any shout. Thanks for watching this incredible political moment unfold. If you enjoyed this breakdown of how Jonathan Roumie's calm response destroyed Boebert's aggressive tactics, smash that like button and subscribe for more explosive political analysis. What did you think of his response? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to share this with anyone who needs to see how to handle a workplace bully like a professional.